was the solo from the fast section of Leonore Overture No. 3 by Beethoven in preparation for your symphony audition for the Houston Youth Symphony. This is one of the great flute excerpts from the classical repertoire, and it is both a challenge and a joy to prepare, and I hope that you are already off to a great start in preparing for your own recording and audition. Obviously, as it says here on your sheet, the listener on the committee will be listening for a full, clear tone with solid intonation, clear articulation, and musical maturity, as well as continuous and musically appropriate vibrato and proficient articulation. This is, in my opinion, primarily an excerpt that demonstrates not only virtuosic fingering, but also virtuosic articulation and a master control of your breath support. Right off the bat, we begin with a G major scale that starts on low D with a crescendo to a forte piano marked on the G as you play the G major triad up to your high E. This, right off the bat, is very problematic from the low notes up to the high notes. Be careful that you don't slam those bottom low notes. Not only are they low, but they are on the fourth beat of the previous measure. The most important note is going to be this F sharp, as it leads all the way up to the G at the top of the staff. So make sure that we have clarity of sound, but also clarity of articulation. The notes need to be short. The air needs to guide the scale as it goes all the way up to the G. When we land on the G, we want to make sure that we hear that beautiful forte piano and then a crescendo up to the high E. But beware that the high E is not too sharp, or that the D before it and after it is not too flat, as this can create an off-balance triad. As we come out of it, we need a nice slurred pair from your B to your G, and then two beautiful, short, staccato articulated notes, the E and the D. Again, this repeats 2 measures later at a lower interval. These are difficult to play and easy to crack, so make sure that you're not pushing too much on the instrument. What comes next is a series of arpeggiated chords. We want to make sure that the fingers play very accurately, so I want you to be practicing this passage very slowly. Practice it all slurred. Practice it all tongued. And then maybe come up with some other ways to practice it. For example, put the slurs on the 2 notes in the middle. You can also practice this passage and the one that comes later, the D chord starting from the high A, with various rhythms. For example, or there are many options, and I would encourage you to come up with all the different ways that you can practice these 2 passages. As you're playing them in the heat of the moment, it can be very easy to not only stumble over the fingers, but to stumble over the tongue, or to let the excitement and the energy get the best of you and we begin to rush. These are all things that can happen all too easily. At the end of both of these arpeggiated passages, we have a grace note before some quarter notes, so we want to make sure that these all come before the beat. And similarly, make sure that these 2 measures where we have the grace note into the quarter notes, we are using the proper inflection for these quarter notes. We want to hear the downbeat as the primary beat, and we need a slight decay as we go into the following quarters. For example, as well as, so that the B and the F sharps are not too important. The next section is incredibly challenging as it taxes your lung support and your breath capacity, as well as your articulation with the repeated E naturals and F sharps. These are the most treacherous notes on the flute, and there are a myriad ways that you could practice this passage, and I will try to share with you as many as I can. Right off the bat, I would again encourage you to practice this passage many times, all slurred, focusing on beautiful sound as well as connection in the air. Then also to practice it entirely articulated, making sure that all the notes are the exact same length, all of the staccato dots are giving you the exact same level of shortness. You'll notice that just now I was using the articulation poo. This can really help to not only start the note, but make sure that the air is always going in exactly the right spot. So when it's time to play the passage at tempo with your tongue, you are ready to make sure that you don't crack. We'll want to practice these both with harmonics from 2 octaves lower as well as an octave and a fifth lower. That one I was using the low notes with my right hand. And in that instance, I was playing with an octave and a fifth lower using the notes of the left hand. Hopefully this helps clear up the sound. Then we want to make sure that the phrase is well intended. I would like to encourage you to make sure that the accent comes on the E natural in measure 344. And again, on the D natural. This will help your air know where it's going. It will also help your phrase feel like it is complete. The triplet section is a challenge as it changes the way we are thinking about the meter. Obviously, we're thinking of this in 2. The instruction on your sheet is to play at half note between 112 to 120. This is a great instruction. As we're working with the metronome, of course, I would encourage you to practice with the whole notes using the bigger beat. So you would set your metronome at 60 and make sure that you aren't getting ahead of the pulse. You can also then set your metronome at 60 and begin it on the second half of every measure so that you always make sure your middle of the bar is in the right place. But this is going to help you the most when we get to measure 346, where we change from duple meter to triple meter. The triplets are going to want to run away. Everyone has this problem. Practice these bars with your metronome, being very clear that your 3s are very even and that they do not rush. Then when we transition back to the 4s, again, make sure that you have practiced this with your metronome and that that pulse is deeply ingrained within you so that we do not run away with those 8th notes again. When we land on this D natural and measure 352, the instruction is that it be pianissimo. This is very challenging for several reasons. First of all, your embouchure will be tired because it has been playing up in this upper register for quite a while. You might be running out of breath. You might feel like the pitch has a tendency to be flat. Not only is D generally a flat note on the flute, but as is the tendency for many flute players, when we are playing at a softer dynamic, the pitch can tend to sag. So there are a lot of things to think about when you get here. I would encourage you to practice this note in a lot of different ways. Practice this phrase arriving in a happy forte. So that you can know what the pitch should feel like. You can know where should I be blowing at the angle on the flute. And then practice it all softly. So you can feel where that soft position is for you. And then begin to play around and find out where are you going to be able to create the most drama when you change from your forte, soloistic, orchestral flute dynamic to your most intimate pianissimo dynamic. This excerpt is a duet with the bassoon, your colleague behind you. So you want to make sure that when you land on this note, you guys are right in tune, the pitch is perfectly latched in. Another challenge in this section is that when you're playing with the bassoon, you have a measure of rest in measure 339. Your colleague behind you is going to be playing an ascending scale. Make sure that you don't come in early. this can cause a lot of problems, and the person listening to your audition video will be paying attention that your A natural does not enter too early. Articulation is always going to be a challenge in this excerpt, making sure that we don't crack any notes. So I want to emphasize again that you practice this slowly with beautiful articulation. Play all slurred so that we find that beauty center of sound, and then we play with our articulation so that the tongue knows exactly where it fits in creating this, this energy. And then lastly, that's what we want to talk about, is the energy for this excerpt. There's a lot of it. It's a fast excerpt, it's fun to play fast, it's challenging, there's a lot of virtuosity built into this moment. So I would encourage you to practice slowly. Make sure that when it comes time to record this excerpt, your energy doesn't get the best of you and the entire excerpt doesn't turn into a runaway train. This will help you feel grounded and stable. Your breathing is equally as important. Make sure that you pay attention to where you're going to breathe in these longer phrases. Of course, you're going to breathe on the 8th rest in measure 342. There are a lot of options as for where to breathe after that. My personal favorite is to not breathe at all. You will find at tempo, if you fill up in the full measures rest and then top off again in the 8th rest, if you play at an accurate tempo and don't play too loud, wasting air on your articulated notes, you will be able to make it to the end of the phrase. You might even have some air left when you get there. But another couple options would be that you breathe in between the transition from the 8th note to the quarter note triplets at the end of measure 345. A lot of people like that. Also, I think what might be the easier one is that you breathe before the duple begins again in measure 350. That breath can also help make sure that you set the downbeat of measure 350 in the right place, and then you continue on at your tempo that you are playing hopefully very accurately. As you prepare for your audition, I hope that you can keep all of these things in mind: clarity of articulation, clarity of phrase, clarity of breathing, and clarity of dynamics are going to make sure that you give your very best when you record your audition, and I wish you all good luck.